Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
I read an article and it said that Claressa Shields says if she was a man, she'd be the face of boxing. Where to lie? Name another boxer who got my accomplishments.
Accomplishments in and of themselves do not make you the face of boxing or even a big draw in the sport of boxing. I mean, take Guillermo Rigondeaux. He was a double gold medalist, unified champion, but he was never a big draw.
The hope is that by the time you become an accomplished fighter, you also become a draw, but it's not an exact science.
And let's start from the beginning. The Junior Olympics. 2-time gold medalist, Junior Olympics. Then we'll go to the big Olympics, the real Olympics. 2-time Olympic gold medalist.
Being a 2-time Olympic gold medalist didn't make Nicola Adams the face of boxing in her country.
It didn't make Guillermo Rigondeaux the face of boxing in this one.
Or Vasyl Lomachenko. They're both double gold medalists, but that didn't make them the face of boxing in this country.
She's got her wires crossed.
2012 and 2016. Now we're going to turn pro. World champion. 4 fights.
Some might say that Claressa Shields becoming a world champion in only 4 fights only speaks to the lack of depth up there at super middleweight where she debuted.
Some do say that.
Though even if you out there disagree, becoming a champion in 4 fights does not make you the face of boxing.
The face of boxing is the fighter that generates the most interest, draws the most at the box office, at the gate.
Not who makes it to a title the fastest.
Or was it 3? I can't remember. 3-time undisputed champ. I was undisputed champ in 8 fights. Or was it 7? I really can't remember.
And that doesn't make you the face of boxing. That doesn't make you the biggest draw in the American market or the biggest draw in women's boxing overall. If we're going to talk about who the face of boxing is whoever has the most drawing power.
And that's Katie Taylor.
That's how it's always been. The face of boxing, the face of the sport, has always been linked to who generates the most money, the most interest, and who has the most drawing power. Sorry to say that that's not Claressa.
3-time undisputed champ. I got 13 world titles. Name another man who has done that. If I was a man with those accomplishments, I would be the face of boxing.
No, you wouldn't. If you were a man, you wouldn't have been able to win that many titles in so little fights because the men's divisions, super middleweight, middleweight, and junior middleweight, those divisions in men's boxing have more men campaigning in them than the women do. Claressa currently campaigns as a middleweight and reigns as her division's undisputed champion.
At middleweight.
But in the women's middleweight division here today, there are only 36 ranked fighters. You heard that right. Worldwide, there are only 36 women fighters that fight at middleweight compared to over 1,500 in the men's middleweight division.
You really can't compare them. When Claressa tabulates how many belts she's won across 3 weight classes in only 13 fights, you were only able to do that in the women's divisions because there aren't that many women at those weights, and many of those titles were vacant. That's not possible in the men's divisions.
The last couple of years at those weights, junior middleweight, middleweight, super middleweight, the belts were fragmented. The world titles were divided between separate fighters, separate champions. Only in recent years did Canelo Alvarez unify all the belts in the men's super middleweight division. At middleweight,
there are about 3-4 champions at middleweight.
Only one at junior middle, but should Jermell Charlo move up and vacate all those titles, they're going to be redistributed.
And a new crop of champions will sprout.
As stated, it's noteworthy that Claressa has accomplished what she's accomplished at these weights in the sport of women's boxing, but in the sport of men's boxing, those are more densely populated weight classes to where you couldn't do all of that in 13 fights. It wouldn't be possible.
Promotional issues, platform issues, bureaucratic red tape, the same bureaucratic red tape that holds up a lot of fights.
Mandatories in the queue. I mean, it wouldn't be possible to do it in that number of fights in that amount of time in the sport of men's boxing, and Clarissa really shouldn't even compare them because they're different beasts.
I still don't know why she does that and what she's trying to prove.
Comparing herself to a man and saying that if she were a man, based on the accomplishments she has here and now, that she would be the face of boxing, the face of men's boxing, I guess, when there are many accomplished male boxers, 4-division champion Kazuto Ioka, 4-division champion Chocolatito, that aren't the face of boxing.
Even though they're very accomplished.
You can be very accomplished and still be successful, but being the face of boxing, becoming that, it's not an exact science.
The hope is that the fighter will rise to popularity fight by fight by accomplishing great things. I mean, that is what the hope is, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Take Demetrius Andrade, for example, a former Olympian and a 2-division champion with less marquee value than, say, Jaime Munguia.
It's not an exact science.
Men's super middleweight and cruiserweight news. I'm sure most of you have heard already that Badu Jack stated, "I won't be fighting Canelo next." They said the weight difference is too much. They wanted to drain the old man and fight me 20 pounds under the cruiserweight limit for the title, plus a rehydration clause. Canelo, let's give the fans what they want to see, and fight David Benavidez.
Little jab there.
It was approximately 2 to 3 weeks ago when Badu Jack expressed an interest in voluntarily defending his newly obtained WBC title against Canelo Alvarez on the premise that Canelo had an interest in facing Lunga Makabu.
But we know what happened. He never ended up facing Lunga Makabu. He ended up fighting Dimitri Bivol instead.
Having lost the fight to Dimitri Bivol at light heavyweight, any plans of moving up to cruiserweight were scrapped, put on the back burner. The focus then became getting Dimitri Bivol back in the ring.
Badu Jack's rationale seems to have been that because Canelo was willing to move up to fight Lunga Makabu, he'd be willing to move up and fight him instead.
Because he beat Lunga Makabu, took his WBC title from him, though Canelo Alvarez himself never made any mention of wanting to challenge Badu Jack. He didn't ask Jack for a title shot.
Jack volunteered to give him one, and we all know why.
So here you have a guy who's been campaigning as a cruiserweight for approximately 3 years now and 6 fights.
He's a cruiserweight. He's a full-blown cruiserweight.
Accusing Canelo Alvarez of trying to quote-unquote drain him, but what are you doing targeting a fight with a super middleweight? Do you normally target fights with super middleweights? Is that what cruiserweights normally do?
But he tried to fight Lunga Makabu.
And you're not Lunga Makabu. I mean, they never even got as far as talking about the prescribed weight for a Makabu fight. Any plans of moving up to fight Lunga Makabu at cruiserweight were scrapped the moment Dimitri Bivol beat Canelo.
Killed all of that.
This isn't even the first time that Badu Jack expressed an interest in facing Canelo Alvarez. This has been going on for approximately 2 years now. It was on the Mike Tyson Hot Boxing podcast that both he and Amir Abdallah,
Back in 2021.
after having already debuted as a cruiserweight and having already fought there, Badu Jack was saying he'd like to fight Canelo Alvarez and he'd be willing to move down to light heavyweight to do it.
It was 2 years ago. He's been talking about fighting this guy for 2 years.
Now I have a month vacation. After that, if we get a huge opportunity for something like that with Canelo, yeah, I'll fight another fight at 175. If not,
Why don't you act for it?
yeah, but he want to unify, be undisputed at 168, and he's supposed to fight Caleb Plant.
This was in 2021, before Canelo Alvarez beat Caleb Plant and before he became the super middleweight division's undisputed champion. At this time, Badu Jack was already campaigning as a cruiserweight.
That's how long they've been bouncing around the idea that Badu Jack should fight Canelo Alvarez, but I've never seen Canelo express any interest, even now.
Even now that he's WBC cruiserweight champion, I've never seen Canelo Alvarez in pursuit of Badu Jack or expressing an interest in fighting Badu Jack. It's the other way around. It's Jack and Amir Abdallah.
They're the ones who want to fight Canelo. They're the ones who said, at least in 2021, that they'd go as far as moving back down to light heavyweight for that fight.
Now, Canelo Alvarez, based on what Badu Jack is saying, he wasn't proposing that Badu come down to light heavyweight.
No.
Based on what Badu Jack is saying, they would have still been within the cruiserweight limit because cruiserweight starts anywhere after 175 and ends at 200 pounds. Anything in between is cruiserweight.
But Badu Jack says that he can't do it. Badu Jack says they were quote-unquote trying to drain the old man.
Yeah, and you were trying to cash in on fighting the little one. We all know that Canelo Alvarez isn't a cruiserweight by any stretch of the imagination. He's barely a super middleweight. He stands in at approximately 5'7", 5'8".
He's a very small guy.
Boxing insider Rick Glacier reacted to the news by saying Badu Jack is a class act. Didn't bow down to Canelo's ridiculous catch weight of 180 pounds and a rehydration clause. And Badu's promoter...
Wait, so Canelo's catch weight is ridiculous to Rick, but Badu Jack pursuing a super middleweight, that's not ridiculous.
A super middleweight who isn't even a big super middleweight. Canelo Alvarez is on the smaller, much smaller end of the spectrum as far as super middleweights go. There are statuesque super middleweights like David Morrell and David Benavidez.
How come Badu Jack didn't offer any of them a voluntary title shot?
Because those guys ain't worth no fucking money, that's why.
Do you see Badu Jack offering up a lot of super middleweights and a lot of light heavyweights a voluntary title shot? You don't see him doing that, right?
Right.
He named Canelo specifically.
And we all know why. Because opposite the ring Canelo Alvarez, Badu Jack would make more money than he'd make unifying that entire fucking weight class. That entire fucking division. You could put him in there with Arsene Goulamarian and J.O. Pataya, Chris Billum Smith, and he would not make with them what he makes fighting a super middleweight in Canelo Alvarez. That's why he called him out.
Yeah.
He's got a mandatory challenger in the queue that goes by the name Noel Gavor, a stubborn customer and an experienced, durable cruiserweight.
At 40 years old, that's a risky fight for Badu Jack, so for being in a risky fight, why not pursue Canelo?
These are just my thoughts. There's a very vocal minority that are trying to turn this on Canelo Alvarez as if it were Canelo Alvarez pursuing Badu Jack when it's the other way around.
I don't blame him.
But let's get it straight. It's Badu Jack that keeps expressing an interest in Canelo, not the other way around.
You know, when Canelo Alvarez himself, years ago, wanted a Floyd Mayweather fight, he actually offered to fight him at a catchweight. That was right after the Kermit Cintrone fight.
Because Floyd was the A-side fighter, the marquee fighter, the face of boxing at the time, Canelo knew he had to make a sacrifice to get that fighter in the ring years ago when Chad Dawson, at light heavyweight, wanted to fight with Andre Ward, who was campaigning as a super middleweight at the time. He offered to come down
To super middle because he knew Andre wasn't a light heavyweight and you're the one that wants him, so go get him.
Canelo Alvarez is not the one pursuing Badu Jack. It's Badu Jack pursuing Canelo. So if you want him, it's going to take some gimme. It's going to take some compromise.
You're saying that it's too physically taxing for you to cut down 20 pounds at your age, but what do you think it is for Canelo Alvarez to jump up there to cruiserweight? Does he look like a cruiserweight to you?
The disparity in weight between where the fighters campaign is far too great for both sides, which would be a victimless crime if you didn't have a small army of individuals trying to blame Canelo.
A vocal minority who seem to fault Canelo Alvarez for everything.
Even when it's a cruiserweight, a full-blown fucking cruiserweight pursuing him. It's clear that with those guys, Canelo can't do nothing right.
So you can't waste logic on illogical, irrational people.
I can only tell you what I think and how I got there. And if you want to know what I think and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, it's Badu Jack's loss, not Canelo. Canelo's going to make money with or without Badu Jack, but will Badu Jack make with a Arsene Goulamarian?
A Chris Billum Smith, a J.O. Pataya, will he make with them what he could have made with Canelo?
You say that they're trying to drain you and trying to weaken you, but what are you trying to do chasing around a super middleweight?
Because Badu Jack isn't the naturally bigger fighter, he isn't the cruiserweight here.
Losers hate winners, folks. That's how you can sum this all up. And oftentimes, when you see a fighter as successful as a Canelo Alvarez, what usually happens is they're dehumanized. People that can't see the forest through the trees want to blame this guy for everything but the rain.
In their mind's eye, it's completely okay for a cruiserweight to target a super middleweight.
In their mind's eye, the cruiserweight is the real victim here because they were trying to drain him, as if he himself isn't looking to use a size advantage over a much, much smaller fighter.
What do you think he called him out for?
Do you see Badu Jack calling out any other super middleweights?
Knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew why.
Men's welterweight news ahead of their long-awaited showdown. Terrence Crawford's trainer, Brian Bomac McIntyre, says, they're looking at us like we're the B-side. That's all right.
There is a credible enough argument there that Terrence Crawford is the B-side to Errol Spence Jr. on the premise that Errol has sold more pay-per-views than Terrence, and he is currently in possession of more belts than Terrence.
They're looking at us like we're the B-side, Brian Bomac McIntyre, Crawford's longtime head trainer, said during Tuesday's press conference at the Beverly Hills Hotel in Beverly Hills, California. That's all right. That's what we know. Glad they got this fight made. Glad both fighters stayed the course and stayed true to the game to show who the best fighter in the world is. That just speaks to true values of each fighter's character.
Terence Crawford being viewed as the B-side and being treated as such for the longest time may have worked to his benefit, not his detriment.
Especially ahead of this fight because he hasn't been allowed to live high on the hog and grow complacent over time after time.
He's got something to prove.
Oddly enough, he's the more accomplished fighter of the two. He is a reigning 3-division, 2-time lineal, 2-time Ring Magazine, former undisputed, current reigning champion, but it's Errol that gets all the plaudits. It's Errol that gets all the praise.
Even though he's a sparsely active fighter, hasn't fought in over a year.
The fight between them will settle all the arguments. This fight versus Errol Spence Jr. will mark Terence Crawford's 4th as a pay-per-view headliner, the one area where he has not excelled in the sport. Spence fights in his 5th consecutive pay-per-view main event and is also a longtime favorite son of Premier Boxing Champions who presents the event. Crawford makes his PBC debut with this fight and is perfectly fine with his opponent continuing to enjoy
preferential treatment, as his focus is on becoming a 3-division lineal champion and undisputed at 2 separate weights.
the latter, which no other male boxer has ever accomplished. The author of this article should have tacked on that it has been accomplished, just not in the 4-belt era.
Not this one.
We're going to show who the best fighter in the world is on July 29th. It will be us, Vowed McIntyre. I know Spence is coming. I know Derek James. Spence's boxing lifetime trainer is going to train the shit out of him. I know his team is going to do a damn good job over.
They'll try.
Though I'm convinced that Errol Spence Jr., solid southpaw that he might be and a good decorated champion, he's not as nuanced as Terence Crawford.
And not as hungry.
It's not often you see an accomplished fighter like Terence Crawford exhibit this kind of hunger. In Terence Crawford's own words, had he not picked up the phone and called Errol Spence Jr. directly, we wouldn't be here now. In truth, after 4-5 years of this, a lot of other fighters would have just moved on and did something else, for better or worse.
A lot of other guys would have given up.
Especially after the failed set of negotiations last year. It seemed like all hope for this fight was lost. I want to give credit to Errol Spence Jr. for being a man of his word, for deciding to honor what he said so many years ago, that he wouldn't leave this division without vying to become its undisputed champion. I do think Errol deserves some credit there, though I don't think it's going to work out in his favor, and I never have.
Before the car accident, after the car accident.
I've always favored Terence Crawford to win this fight.
And because he's the one who picked up the phone and got the ball rolling to get us here, I feel he is the hungrier fighter, whereas for Errol,
It's more of a, what the hell, why not?
kinda, yeah.
Brian Bomac McIntyre continued, I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, we will walk away victoriously.
I think the fight's gonna end in a knockout.
Errol Spence Jr. is a characteristically aggressive fighter that opens up quite a bit, and that's Terence Crawford's area of opportunity to catch him in between the shots.
Think he's gonna stop him.